Hello everybody, this is Janardhan here. Good evening. I see Vishwesh Rao online. For all others who are joining, I think we see around 15 members in queue to join this. We'll wait for 2 more minutes and get started. I'm Janardhan here. I will do the brief introduction about the meetup and hand it over to Drusinga Patro, who will be doing the presentation today. Hi Arun. Hi Ranjan. Okay, we'll get started. Thank you all for joining. While others join, I will do a brief introduction. My name is Janardhan. I am one of the co-organizers for this JavaScript meetup. We initially started this meetup as JavaScript Meetup Bangalore. Slowly, we are using technology to spread beyond the geographic boundaries, and that's where we are slowly aligning this meetup to JavaScript Meetup, and not much focusing, not really on the Bangalore part, but we are going global. I will just give a brief introduction in terms of what is this community. There are many meetups around. I just will highlight in terms of what is that we focus here and what is the purpose of our existence. Yeah, as I mentioned, the JavaScript meetup, we started off in December 2015. We started off with a set of volunteers. The founding members are Ganesh, Harikiran, and myself. We took charge in terms of identifying JavaScript as one of the programming languages, which needs formal learning. Most people start the language with just existing code, do some tweaks, and then become programmers in JavaScript. But we felt there is a dire need for formal learning where people will understand what the right way to use JavaScript. And there is enough JavaScript framework that are proliferating. And we thought there's a good opportunity for us to create the group where we encourage sharing of knowledge. This group is completely full of volunteers who are passionate about sharing and common sharing for the benefit of community, doing a lot of sacrifices. And these are just set of engineers and set of enthusiasts. On your right, you will see some of the moderators who moderate our WhatsApp channels, who moderate our Slack channels, and who encourage us to, any answers required by the participants, we ensure that, they get the right answers and right solutions. Similarly, we also have in this group speakers who have been contributing heavily for a while. Yeah, we are right now only sharing. There's a question in the chat room. Is it possible to see you guys? Just 1 minute. We will. You're able to hear us? Hi, you're able to hear us? We are doing only audio right now. I'm doing screen sharing. Okay, yeah. Okay, sure. Okay, so we were mostly focusing on the content, and yeah, we'll go back. Okay. Yeah, and we'd also like to thank you. We have repeat speakers who is Naveen, who did the last webinar, and today we have Drusinga Patro, who is doing the Angular. He has given multiple talks earlier in the in-person meetups earlier, and we continue to do that. Today we are going to cover Angular 4. Also, I'd like to highlight one special participant, Debashish. He has been, I think, for all the 15 meetups we conducted. I think I could see him in 13 out of 15 meetups, 15 or 16 meetups we conducted. So he's a constant member, and also he gives continuous feedback to us to improve this. I'd like to thank everybody, and particularly I would like to thank our supporters who not only give a lot of enthusiastic participation and encouragement, but also they do financial support. For example, SKUcode.com, they have sponsored the Amazon gift voucher for the speakers, the last meetup, and CodeOps, who have been financing for our meetup.com website. So these things are small, but still they make a big difference to the community. I thank each and everyone in this group. Yeah, the mission, what drives us, we do have to create this as a platform for web enthusiasts to share knowledge. I think the bigger part of it is it's not about training or just learning some things. It's about can we contribute towards the applications that make a difference. So the world is changing fast, and this group, the community who we are building, we are 3,000 plus members. Can we start looking into something where we develop some applications that make a difference? I will highlight in terms of some of the various ways in which you can join and contribute. Yeah, and here if you see, we have chosen JavaScript as a central theme for this meetup, but we do encourage people to contribute and also discuss about any web technologies. It could be JS frameworks, but also our primary focus sometimes once in a while goes back to the core features and capabilities of JavaScript. Because we see that many of the time people use JavaScript thinking it's just another language, but they tend to not exploit the core features and capabilities of JavaScript. But we are supportive of any items which are like JavaScript frameworks, like what we're covering today, Angular, Ember, and others. How can you join us? There are various ways you can join and contribute. Yeah, I'll just wait for the next slide to refresh to the screen. Yeah. You can find us, the primary page where you can register is meetup.com, meetup.com/JavaScript Meetup Bangalore. Here is where we have all the members, all the communication in terms of the upcoming events, whether it's webinars, whether it's in-person sessions, all of them happen through that. And I would encourage everyone to be there on that. That is a superset of all the community that we have developed. In addition, we have also started a group in Slack. That is JS Meetup bglr.slack group. So there's a shortened invite link is also there. Please use that to join. That it helps in terms of you have any common questions where you're not getting an answer, your day-to-day work or job postings or any other meetups. We also encourage people promoting in terms of any other meetups or any conferences which is benefit to the community. Please post it here. Slack keeps us more organized, and also it is not a channel where everyone gets everything, but people interested can selectively choose which channels they would like to get notification. So please do that. And we have a YouTube channel. YouTube channel has been a recent creation. We created, I believe, 25th of September or so, and we have got major subscribers. We have 160 plus subscribers right now. We continue to do these webinars. The reason we started this webinar series is many people used to send us requests saying that you are hosting a lot of meetups, but either due to that particular day was not convenient to them, they couldn't attend the meetup, or sometimes there are people who are geographically distributed away from Bangalore. So to reach out to that community, we started this webinar series. We are going to use this webinar series as most of the introductory sessions, because in this type of streaming, what we are doing, you will be able to hear it, and then we have only a text chat window to really clarify your questions. So we will do the very basic introductory part of it in this series, and with the live sessions, which is the in-person meetups, we will try to do it in a common setting. Like the upcoming one is at Dell EMC. Dell EMC, we are doing the same session on Angular, but we will do a workshop, which is a hands-on session where developers and newbies can get started developing a Angular web app. We also have a Git repository, a GitHub repository. As I mentioned, we really encourage people developing software. Learning is one part of it, but contribute and collaborate developing new software, so that we have new applications coming out of this group. That is one of the intents. Here we also post our webinar code as well as the presentation slides. After this session is over, we'll be posting our slides as well as the content code snippets into this location. Yeah, a note in terms of the upcoming meetup, there is a meetup. I'll wait for the slide to refresh. Yeah, we have a meetup that is upcoming, which is 28th of October on a Saturday. This is a common pattern that we do. We do it on a Saturday. We do a half-day session. 10 to 1 p.m. is a session. It is at Dell EMC, which is KR Puram Marthahalli Ring Road. Please join us there. We will do a workshop. It's a hands-on session. You can bring your laptops. We'll also share the code early so that you can download it, and then the prerequisite software you download, and then you start learning how to develop an Angular app. Please register if you have not registered yet. We encourage you to register, so that helps us prepare our logistics. With that introduction, two call for actions. I would encourage all of you to join the Slack community. You can post the questions in the general channel if you have questions, or if you want detailed discussions post this session. And now I give it over to Nrusingha Patro. Thanks a lot for him for joining this and helping us share his knowledge. Over to Patro.
Hello guys, whoever has joined the session. So before starting, thank you to the Janardhan and our JavaScript community team and the SKU code who are helping us for all the sessions what we are conducting, and giving me the opportunity as well to speak. So I'll start with an introduction to Angular 4. So myself, so I'll give a small introduction about me before starting. So my name is Nrusingha Charan Patro. People usually know me with Patro. And I have around 10 years of work ex around web application, mobile application, development. So I mainly work on the web technologies, mobile technologies. So currently I'm working for Target India, which is a US retail company, and I work there as a full stack developers, and mainly I work on mobile hybrid application development as well as the backend side Java. So with that, we'll go ahead and start with our Angular 4. So there are lot of changes in Angular in recent years. So before it was only Angular, and now the Angular team, after that the Angular team has released Angular 2 and then now 4. Okay, so that is no Angular 3. So if the question is coming why there is no Angular 3, because of their semantic versioning issue. So they skipped that Angular 3 version because few of their modules were already on version 3 when they have launched Angular 2 because of some changes. So they thought of skipping version 3, and after 2 they went ahead to the Angular 4. Okay, so now we'll talk about the major changes, what has happened in between Angular 1 to 4. But even before that, we want to understand what is Angular. So a guy who never worked on the Angular, any of the version. So for them, Angular is a JavaScript framework mainly used for the client-side application development. And Angular is for both the mobile as well as the desktop web applications. Even the hybrid applications we can build using Angular. So I mean hybrid application means it will look like a native application which you can directly download from the Play Store or the App Store. Okay, and Angular is actually, to start with Angular, you should have a basic knowledge of at least HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So to get started with Angular, so that knowledge is sufficient to get started with Angular. And Angular is open source. That's a big advantage of Angular because it has a very huge community. Any day-to-day problem, any we are facing, we can connect with the community. We can get the answer. The community helps sometime to Angular team to get the early feedbacks and get the early problems what they are facing on their day-to-day development using this framework. So that helps when being an open source because you get a good community support. So saying that, why Angular? Because there are a lot of JavaScript frameworks are available there, and all are good. I'm not saying like, so there is React.js is there, and jQuery was there for a longer time. So many JavaScript frameworks available. Then why Angular? So what Angular does, So Angular explains the HTML elements and attributes, so its expression. So these are what I'm saying, core things which makes Angular popular, or which uh, makes your application development easier. So what Angular does, it provides the opportunity to create your own HTML elements and attributes. So on by saying, so it's expressive. So in the HTML only, I can create my own elements, which is not there. And the best part of Angular is its powerful data binding. So they have a very good data binding feature, and which helps us to integrating with the view. So that's what the Angular. And the modular design. So Angular has been designed to be modular, because if I talk about the Angular 1, that also was modular, but not that way. How the Angular 4 is currently. Okay, even before that, I just want to set a context about what the Angular 1, 2, and 4. So Angular 1 was a pretty old framework. I mean, pretty old means maybe 4 years before, 5 years before it's become very popular. And Angular 1 was there quite a times, and then in 2015, and I think they released the Angular 2, which was a major change from Angular 1, because in between the JavaScript ES6 standards got released, and which was again a major change in the JavaScript specifications. So they have leveraged all those ES6 capabilities and the browser modernization and everything, and they created Angular 2, which was a breaking change from Angular 1. And now I think in March sometime or April, they released the Angular 4. And between Angular 2 and Angular 4, it's not a breaking change. They did some improvement around the performance mainly. Yeah, so so some question has come about Angular 5 also. Yes, so they are releasing Angular 5, and I have not get chance to see what all the things are there in Angular 5. But yeah, but that's also not a breaking change. I was seeing their early releases. So from Angular 1, it was a breaking change. Angular 2, 4, that was not a breaking change. So main they have done few performance improvements, and they have done more modularization, so which helps to their strategy of mobile first also. So they want the mobile application as well as the web application which runs on a desktop. So that's the major differences between, at the very high level, the Angular 1, 2, and 4, and there is no Angular 3. Okay, so the Angular 4 has more modular design, which helps to create us the reusable blocks. So they have leveraged all the features of ES6, and which helps them to make Angular more modular. And even the JavaScript also was lacking this modular feature before ES6 release, and after the ES6 came, this import-export concept of modules came up, which helped the Angular also to make an application more modular. And the one more good thing about Angular is its built-in services. So there are so many normal operations which we do in an application, like backend integration. We have to connect with our REST APIs to get the data from our backend services. So the Angular provides such kind of built-in services, which makes those integrations pretty smooth and easy. Apart from that, Angular is complete. Why I'm saying it's complete? Because it provides library for your unit testing and end-to-end test also. So Angular doesn't only provide library to build the application, but it provides a library to test your application also, and whoever are working on a. Yeah, so a question is coming, will you be explaining about data binding with example? Yeah, so my further slides are there on data binding. So it provides libraries for unit test and end-to-end test also, so which makes Angular complete. So these things helps because when we create a big applications without testing, it cannot survive. So if you're creating a small application, you are not testing, that's well and fine. But with a bigger application, a lot of teams are working, your test strategy has to be on top. Otherwise, it will be very, very difficult to manage the application in the long term. So that's why it's very critical to have your unit test and your end-to-end test, and Angular provides libraries for that as well. Okay, so those are very general. I talked about the Angular. So what is there in the Angular 4? Because those things were there in the Angular 1 as well. So if I talk about Angular 4, the best thing is fast. So it's fastest compared to your Angular 1 or Angular 2. So your app load time is fast in Angular 4. The bindings, I mean the change detections are even faster in Angular 4. The rendering time is faster. So Angular 4 is fast and it's modern. Why it's modern? It's adopting all the latest JavaScript features. So the ES6 features, after that there are few features common, ES7 also. So now JavaScript is releasing its features per year. That's what the JavaScript team, ECMA team has decided. And Angular 4 is adopting those all new JavaScript features, and it's supporting all the latest and legacy browser. So that's why it's modern. And apart from that, it's adopting it's making easy also. Why easy? Because it has a lesser concepts compared to Angular 1. Because Angular 1 was doing a lot of built-in directives. That is not there in Angular 4. Angular 4 is very limited directives, so you don't have to remember so many things, how to achieve it, or you don't have to fall back to the documentation every time if you want to try out something. So there were very less concept, very less in build directives, simplified APIs to connect with, and easy bindings. So these are the things which makes Angular 4 easy compared to its previous version. Plus it has having incredible tooling support. Because before, if we remember the previous era of Angular 1 and all, the IDEs were not that enough smart on Angular. They were not able to, the IntelliSense was not there, autocomplete was not there. People are struggling of those tooling capabilities. But with Angular 4 coming into picture and the IDEs, so it keeps those things, the auto complete or IntelliSense features in IDE if you write Angular using TypeScript. And apart from that, it gives the command line interface to create app. So you don't have to create your JavaScript, TypeScript files manually anymore. So it provides a command line interface. You just go to the command line, write a command, it will create an application, start application for you. Even there are command lines to generate the code blocks. So you can generate a specific code blocks also using the command line. Plus it is having the lint integration. Lint is nothing but it keeps on checking your syntaxes and everything's are fine, or you're following the correct coding practice or not. So these all tooling was all inbuilt now when you create an Angular application. So that makes your Angular 4 even better. It's fast, it's modern, it's easy, and it has incredible tooling support. Now Angular 4 comes with different language choice. So you can build Angular with different languages now. So it has a choice. You can write Angular 4 application using your old JavaScript, that's ES5, or the latest JavaScript, that's ES6 standards. So when you write with ES6 standards, what happens behind the scene? It transpiles to ES5 because still a lot of browsers doesn't understand all the ES6 things. So what it does, it transpiles it to ES5 so that all the browsers can understand it, and it runs on a browser. So, but you can write on ES5, you don't have to worry about those because Angular takes care of everything behind the scene for you. You can choose ES5 or ES6 syntax to write your Angular application. Even you can go with TypeScript. TypeScript is pretty popular now because it's a superset of JavaScript. It provides a lot of features on top of ES6 to make your application more look like close to the traditional programming like C++ or the Java or the .NET. So whoever is coming from those backgrounds, it will be very much, it looks pretty similar for them, the TypeScript, the uses of TypeScript. and TypeScript helps with its strong typing and all. I'll talk about those. But yeah, JavaScript, the Angular provides that option. You can write your application in TypeScript. There is one more language also which Angular support, that is Dart. Although it's a non-JavaScript language, Dart is developed by Google itself. But who doesn't want to go with the traditional JavaScript language, they can go with the Dart. The Angular team has a suggestion or the recommendation to go with TypeScript. So that's why I'll talk a little about TypeScript. So TypeScript is nothing but it's a superset of JavaScript, and this TypeScript, actually the browser doesn't understand TypeScript, so that's a challenge now. So to remove that challenge, it can transpile or compile to JavaScript. So you can write your code in TypeScript. Don't worry about behind the scene what happening. The Angular is having inbuilt transpiler or compiler which compile it back to JavaScript, which a browser can understand even before rendering into a JavaScript, even before rendering to a browser. So that's the best part, and it's open source. TypeScript is open source, and we know the beauty of open source. So, and it's the best part of TypeScript is strong typing. So from so many years, JavaScript was lacking one thing: the strong typing, right? So in Java or the C++, we are having strong typing. I can say this variable has to be a string type. I cannot assign a number, but that was not true for JavaScript. So to avoid that, TypeScript is having strong typing, so it helps for a guy who has come from non-JavaScript background to start with JavaScript pretty fast, because it will almost looks like they are writing the similar way how they used to do in traditional programming language like Java and C++. And the TypeScript is having all these years 2005 features like class and inheritance, which is now part of JavaScript as well. And those features are also available in TypeScript. And the best part of TypeScript is the IDE support with all features like autocomplete and IntelliSense, which we are lacking in JavaScript before. So now with the IDEs, they support the TypeScript, and if you're using TypeScript and creating some class and everything, then when you're creating an instance out of that class and trying to access the properties and methods, those IntelliSense and autocompletes are there with this TypeScript now. And TypeScript is available as an NPM package, so we can just take it and install it and start using it. So these are the benefits of using TypeScript, and all the examples what I'll show, I'll develop using TypeScript. So a question comes saying which ID is recommended. Yes, the TypeScript is TypeScript is a recommended language, and ID recommendation I'm having a next slide. So the Visual Studio Code is a recommended ID. I use Visual Studio Code because I like it. The best part is all the IntelliSense and the autocomplete and everything, they support very well with the TypeScript. And the best part is TypeScript is backed by Microsoft. Visual Studio is backed by Microsoft. They have created a IDE code. So they have done a very good work in the IDE, which does almost everything what in the .NET era people used to do in Visual Studio. Apart from that, there are other IDs also there, like Atom is there, Wavestorm is there, Eclipse is there, Bracket is there. All is having their plugins. You can take the plugins for the TypeScript support and everything. But yeah, the recommended one, I'll say the Visual Studio Code. Even you can go with the Visual Studio also. So there are also some plugins there to get to know your TypeScript codes. Okay, so that's all about IDE. I'll be using Visual Studio Code and TypeScript for all our Angular examples. Okay, so next come the environment setup. So before, I remember I have done the sessions on Angular or the other frameworks before, and this environment setup was always a challenging stuff to start with an application. But with Angular 4, they made it pretty easy. So now your environment setup is very, very easy job. So you should have your node and npm on your machine, so that we can download from our Node package manager. NPM we can download from web. You can go to the Node website and you can download the latest version of Node. So once, and I have mentioned, so if you are running, at least make sure you are on the Node 6.9 and NPM 3.xs version. You can check that by saying node --v and NPM -v. So who all are not aware of what the NPM is? NPM is nothing but it's a Node package manager, which helps to download all the packages, install on your machine. So if you're not understanding the package, it's similar to libraries. So using Node package manager, you can download any package, any libraries through command line. You just have to say npm install after installing npm, and the package name. It's pretty simple. It comes and install on your application. So in that way, your package installation also very simple now. So after you have done your installation of Node and NPM, we can go to the command line and we can just say npm install angular/CLI. What the CLI is? So Angular team has created a command line interface which helps us to create the project, create the blocks of code, to run the code, to deploy the code. Everything now we can do using this Angular CLI. So this Angular CLI is very helpful. You can set up your project without Angular CLI also, but this is the recommended way because it's very much easy. You don't have to worry about all the environments what Angular is using. You just install this Angular CLI. Once you install this Angular CLI, go to your command line and just say ng short form of Angular, new, and your project name. So my project name here is, you can see, my app. So when I say ng new, whatever the name of the application I give on command line, so it just downloads a startup application for me, and then it try to install all the dependencies. So when I say all the dependencies, means all the package, library, and everything what it needs to run the Angular application. I'll show you that in a moment. Then we can just go to the project directory and say ng-serve. Your application will start a local server, and you can just go to the browser, hit that local server, and your application is up and running. You can see how simple the setup is. Even the setup has come in a single slide with 3-4 lines, and that's what the setup is here. So now if you go ahead and run this command, I have already installed Angular CLI on my machine. I have already done this Node and npm install on my machine. So I'm just sharing my code now. So if you guys have any question till this point, you can ping on the live chat or on the Slack channel, anywhere. So you can see this, I have just created a small, the start application. So what I have did, I just say ng new and the application name, which I have already did. The application name I have given JS meet dash live. So when you hit dash, it takes a couple of times on your because it tries to install all the Node packages what it needs. So it gives me this application. So this application has just generated by Angular CLI. I have not done any changes as of now. So this you can see the structure what it generates, and if you see there are so many files it has generated. The first file which I want to say is package.json, but I have opened over here. So I'll try to increase the font size. Okay, so package.json is nothing but where Angular mention all its dependencies, what it needs. So I have just now generated this a couple of minutes before. And you can see currently the Angular version we're using is 4.2.4. And so what the package.json is nothing but a JSON file where Angular mention what all libraries or package it need. So you can see all the Angular and what it needs on the dev dependencies. So these all what mainly about what the Angular application packages need during running. And there are few scripts which we can use to run the application. So there is something called, you can see ng serve is there, ng build, ng test. So these are the commands which helps us to do different operations like running the application on a browser, building the application, testing the application, everything now on the single command. So this all setup is already done. I have not done anything. I have just run that command saying ng new and the project name. And here you see a couple of files are there. Angular CLI JSON file, which is nothing but which will having few Angular command line setups. Where you will have this, so whatever the command will run from here, right? So those setups are there for the command line. So command line, to understand how it will perform, it has few setups are there. This editor config file is nothing. So you can, for this project, you can have your editor setting so that if multiple people are working, all will have same indent size, indent style and everything. Git ignore, basically what all the things I want to ignore before pushing it to Git. Karma conf is nothing but, Karma is a tool which helps us to run the unit test. So settings about that. Package.json I've already explained. Protector is a tool which provides by Angular to write your end-to-end test. So end-to-end test means automation running on a browser itself. So Protector is a tool which helps to do that, a README file, and then a tsconfig, which is nothing but a TypeScript configuration file. So because our project will be on TypeScript, so there are a few configuration related to TypeScript is here. And then we are having lint. Lint is nothing but which keeps on checking our code standards. So these are the few files at the root label. At the root label, one you can see E2E folder where our end-to-end test goes. There are a few sample tests also there here. And then node modules. So node modules is whatever the modules the Angular dependent on. So basically all this whatever we have mentioned in the package.json, the dependencies, those get downloaded to this folder called node modules, like all the Angular code and everything. I want to run on the server, the Karma, and the Jasmine, which is used for unit test, Protector. So all these are node modules which goes and sits here. You can see there are so many modules. So now everything works in a modular way. So smaller chunk we create as a module. I mean, in the general practice now in the web development standard, everyone creates a module and then just depend on that module rather than duplicating that code. And then what we worry about is a folder called source, because we don't have to change anything here. In the source, you can see a couple of files are there. And inside source, there is something called app. So this is the app folder where actually our code go. I think it will take some time to refresh. Yeah. So which will app go, and in the app folder, you can see few files are there. I'll come and see, tell you about what these are. Asset is basically we keep all the images and everything. Environments, because your application can run on multiple environments, because if you're working on a live project, you will have your dev environment, your stage environment. So those setup you can do here, and with just one command you can create a build for your stage or dev or like that. And this index.html, so this is your starting point, index.html. So if you see, so this is also pretty small. We don't see a regular JavaScript insertions or the CSS insertion, nothing. So it's pretty small index.html file. Main.ts file is our first TypeScript file. So from index.html, it actually this is the one, it's entry point of application, we can say that the entry point of and polyfills.ts. So most of the browser doesn't support all the features, so for that you need a polyfill. So this polyfill is about that. And then the CSS file for our application. Test.ts is all about testing things, testing setups. That's all done, and few other TypeScript configuration files are there. So with this, this is all Angular generated when you run that CLI command. And now what you can do, you can just run ngserve, and when you run this ngserve, what it does, it did few compilation and everything. The transpile, we can say that. Once it's done, you can see it's all done and it's compiled successfully. If you want to know ngserve, you can see here we have done that. I can just say start also. Once it done that, then I can go to my browser. I can just say localhost. So I'm going to my browser now, where I'll hit localhost, the port number where Angular is running the application. And you can see this is the default what they have generated now. So you can pretty simple. So now what we have done, we have created an Angular application with no time and able to successfully run it on browser. So that's pretty good. So if I want, you can do inspect also, and you can see all the errors, everything in the console, the source file. So now what happens, because it uses a Webpack for all this during the transpile process. So here all the codes and everything, now we can see, even you can put a breakpoint now on the TypeScript file, because now everything we have written on the TypeScript, right? So you can even go and put a breakpoint here, and this breakpoint should be. No, so it's using Webpack. It's not using Grunt Gulp. So this is the answer to a question which Ranjan has asked. So you can see, so these are all your application is set now, because for a developer, this debug is pretty important, because we know we don't write a code right on the first time. So yeah, so that's all set is done. So I'll go back to my browser and sorry, go back to my slide, and we'll see what next for us. So I'm coming back to my slide where my slide is saying create an Angular app, which we already did using a CLI, and we understand what all the folder structure and files it has generated, and we build it and run it on browser, all done. So now we'll understand a bit about Angular module, even before going and changing something to our application, what we just now created. So Angular module, so before even talking about Angular module, now the JavaScript ES6 also is having a module. So don't mix that module with this Angular module. So that module Angular uses to make your application modularized, but apart from that, Angular is having its own module. So the JavaScript module helps us to organize our class, which we can export it from the module, and the other module can import that module or the class and can use it. So that's all about the JavaScript ES6 module. And what Angular module does, it helps to organize the application. So every Angular app will have one Angular module that's called app module. So by convention, we say it app module, that will be our root module, and every Angular application will have that. And Angular app can have multiple modules as well based on the feature. So you can have a feature module also in the same application. Or we can have a shared or common module also inside an Angular application, which can be shared by other modules. And what the module will contain, the Angular module, each Angular module will be having few components and related services associated. So we'll understand when we'll go to the further slide what the component is, what the services is. But all the module will have some code, which in Angular term now we call it a component or Angular services, which will be associated to a module. So if I have a feature module will have its own component, its own services associated with it. But yeah, but altogether everyone will be linked to our root module, because the Angular understands from there where to start, and Angular starts from its root module. Okay, so before that, we go and do some changes to our Angular component, what we have just created. We'll understand what the Angular component is. So Angular application is made of few components and some services which provides functionality across those components. So if you see in general what an Angular application is from a technical point of view, it will have few components and few services, and the services which will be actually provides the functionality across all the components what Angular is having. So Angular can have multiple components, multiple services, multiple modules, and one root module. So in that, the component is nothing but it's a template which will have some view, our normal HTML, which is actually a template, and will be a class. So I'm talking now class because now we are in a ES6 plus era. So now JavaScript also is having class. So now component will have template and a class which is associated with it. And what that class will have, that class will have few properties and method which will be responsible for manipulating the view or holding the model for that view. So template is generally an HTML plus Angular directives. So templates are comprised of HTML and Angular directives. So directive helps in data binding. So we'll see some directives in my coming slides. And class consists of properties which represents our model or the data for the view, and the method which does some action. And component, apart from this, component will also have some metadata which holds additional information about Angular. So additional information which helps Angular to understand it's a component. So that it will have those kind of data also. So we'll see that. And even before we'll see one Angular component example, we have to understand there is one more term which now Angular use is a decorator. What a Angular decorator is. So I'll move to my next slide. So Angular decorator is a function that adds the metadata to a class and its members. So class only becomes an Angular, because you can write a general class in ES6 or TypeScript also, but that class cannot be a component directly. So to make that class to a component, we need some few metadata by which Angular can understand, okay, it's a component. So that providing that metadata where the decorator comes into picture. So decorator helps to provide those metadata to Angular to say this class is actually a component. So decorator nothing but it's a function, and it's always prefixed with @, what we say, or @. Angular provides a built-in decorators like @component, and this @component decorator helps us to create a component. So I'll show that on my next slide, how we can write a component. So now we actually come to the actual coding. So to use, so now you can see on my next slide, I'm using something called, okay, at the bottom I am having a class, and the class name is app component. Okay, this is the name practice or the naming standard that we follow. You can name it anything to your class, but to understand it's a component, we, after the functional name, we just append saying component, so that I can understand, okay, this class is a component by the name itself. So I'm having a class component, app component, and I've used a keyword export. So export is nothing but now a JavaScript feature where you can export the class so that other can import it and use it. And Just before this export class comment, you can see something I mentioned, at component, which is nothing but a function. You can see the parentheses are there, and inside that I'm passing an object. You can see the curly braces, and that object is having a few properties. The one property is selector, the other property is template. So the selector is nothing but a name to that component. With this name, I can use it in any HTML as a directive. So my dash app is nothing but now a directive which I can put it on any HTML page, and it will render me the template what I have defined in the template property. And in the in the template property, now you can use, I have used again a backtick. That's again a new JavaScript way of putting a multi-line string. So now you can see this is a multi-line string, and I have used those backticks, and I have defined my template over here. And this component, and to this component I have to import it, because if I just say add component during the runtime, the browser or the Angular, the browser will say I don't know what this add component is. So this as component I have to import it. So you can see the first line, the import component statement, which I'm importing from Angular code. And as I mentioned, Angular is fully modular. So anything you want to use, any functions, you have to import it first. So I'm importing the component class, and now I'm using it. So that I'm importing from Angular core, and from where this Angular core is there, I showed you a folder called node modules, where I've installed all my node dependencies. So from there it picks this component. So this is a basic example of a component where, so here whatever the data I'm passing inside this component function is nothing but a metadata, and this only makes Angular to understand now this app component class is actually a component. That's why you can see there is no semicolon after @component, because that's how the Angular understand it's a same syntax on top of the class to make it a component. Okay, so this is our component, and then we'll understand the Angular module, because this component cannot run independently without Angular module. As I mentioned in my previous slide, all Angular application will have one root module. So that is Angular module. So now I am showing you one Angular module example, and in that module example, we can see again at the end I'm having one export class app module. Again, this is the naming standard we follow. So if we have to define a class and it's a module, we name it, we append that with a keyword called module, like we did for the component. We're appending the class name with component. You can see the class is blank, but again here we're using one more decorator, and that decorator is ng module decorator. And what this ng module decorator does, it tells the Angular this class called app module is a Angular module now, and we're passing a metadata. You can see there are three properties I'm passing as an object inside a function ng module, and that is basically the imports, declaration, and bootstrap. And you can see all are as an array, which can take multiple element. So imports is an array where I'm importing a browser module. And what this browser module is, so to run the application successfully on browser, so we are dependent on this browser module, and this browser module is again part of Angular code base. You can see I'm importing browser module, the second line of code, from @angular/platform browser. So this we are importing it, and in the imports, so any third-party module or any other module, if our application is dependent on, in the module we have to put in an import. So we have to register in an import statement saying on this browser module we are dependent on. And then declaration. So in the module, I have to declare all the components which are there as part of module. So we saw we created a component, so that component has to be registered, or we have to declare that in the ng module metadata. And one is bootstrap, and this bootstrap is nothing but our entry point. So this is a component which is our entry point. So that's why I mentioned in the bootstrap saying app component. So three things: imports, we have to declare all the component, what is a part of module, and we can have multiple components, but we have to define which component is our bootstrap or the static component. So that's all about the example of component and module. Now we'll go back to code and we'll see if we can do some changes what we have. Yeah, we can have more than one module in the Angular app. So you can create your feature modules, and that module can be imported in your root module. Okay, so I came back to my Visual Studio Code where my application is already running. So I can go to the source folder, the app, and you can see we are already having. Okay, so let it. Okay, so now if I go to source app, you can see we are having one app module.ts, which is whatever I have shown, that's already there. We are having a declaration app component, bootstrap app component, and we are having a component now. You can see the naming conventions here, how we follow. So the module, the file name also we say app.module.ts. The component ts is TypeScript, app.component.ts. Spec this is a test file, so you can ignore for now. And this is an HTML file where you can specify your view and the CSS file. All set. So if we go here, instead of template URL, you can use template also or template URL also. So both way you can provide a view to the component. So I can either use template and I can directly define my HTML stuff here. So it's based on how comfortable you are or how big your view is. Based on that, we can take a call whether to use template URL or template. So what I do, I have already examples I've done instead of time. So I'll just copy that and we'll see how things are running. So you can see as soon as I do some changes, my it started compiling. So what I did now, I took back some code from which is, so in the interest of time I have already done a sample so that I can show it. So what I did, I created a template, you can see, and I in the app component I am having a property where I just have a string saying welcome to meetup, and I'm binding that. I'll cover the binding in detail, but this is how we do a binding. We just use double curly braces, and inside that the property name, the page title, whatever you're seeing here. And we are having a CSS also. You can specify some of any CSS rules if you are interested. So let's say if I having a class page title, I can go here, I can say dot page title, and I can just say color red. That's cool. So all done. So now it's running fine, compiled successfully. I can go to my browser and I can, you can see our first meetup application or the Angular application what I built. So which will be loading in a browser which says welcome to meetup, and my first Angular app which will come for which we just now did some changes. So now you can see what we did, whatever the generated component was there, I just did a small modification in that, and we just changed the text, welcome to meetup, and my first Angular app. Now it's displaying that. So if I go back to my code, you can see in the component.ts, I just have a class where I have a property which is nothing but a data, and I'm just binding to it. You can see how easy now just creating an application with Angular 4, because all setup is done, everything was working, and I did some changes. So you can see this metadata, we're passing selector, template, and style URLs. Style URLs. Here also you can having your inline style, or as well as you can have a separate CSS file and you can point the path of that file. Okay, so if we go to the module.ts, what I have already explained, our app component is already declared over there, bootstrap over there, and it's all set and running. And if you go to the app.component.ts, our selector name is app-root. So you can see that now the app root wanted a selector name, and that we are specifying in the index.html. So when the application loads, it first loads the index.html, and in that index.html you can see app root we have specified, which is nothing but a directive or the component name, what we have mentioned over there when we have created the component. And in the index.html, when it sees this app-root and it tries to load that HTML file, and that's how it comes up. So it's now a single page application also, because Angular helps to achieve a single page application. Although in the application we can have multiple pages, it looks like it is having multiple pages, but behind the scene it's actually a single page, because everything starts with the index.html, and in the index.html we can have app-root, which is nothing but the component selector name. So the selector name, as I mentioned in my previous slide, also helps to put that in HTML file. Okay, with that, so now we have created our application, we put some content, we render it on our browser. We'll go back to our slide and we'll see what next. Okay, so now I'll go back to slides. In the slide, the component template. So I think this all I have already mentioned. Template is created with HTML and Angular directives. Component can have an inline template. We saw that, so we can have inline template, as well as we can have link template with property template URL. Component can have custom directive also, that will see in my coming slides. And so what a directive is, for a guy which is new to Angular, directives are custom HTML elements or attributes to extend our application HTML vocabulary. Just a moment, looks like sharing has some issue. Okay, so yeah, so our component can have the template we saw. We can have inline templating. We can have template URL. Component can have custom directive also. So the custom directive means you can create a other component, the second component, and that component you can insert in a template of first component or the root component. So we'll see that, we'll do it, and so that we call it directives. So directives are nothing but again a custom HTML elements or attributes to extend our application HTML vocabulary. So if you see our index.html page, which uh, we just saw, so we are using this app root. So if we go to the plain HTML, there is no element called app dash root. So but we have created that custom HTML element, so that's called your directive. And Angular is also having few built-in directives. We'll see that in coming slides. Okay, so your application can have built-in directive, and there are two most popular built-in directives in Angular is ngIf and ngFor. I'll show you that in my next slide. The ngIf and ngFor, and these are structural built-in directives, and you can see here the ngIf actually helps us. So you can see there is a table HTML element is there, and in the table HTML element, if you want to hide or show the table, you can have a ngIf. So if there is no data in the table, you can hide that basically with ngIf. So what would happen, it will remove that element itself from the HTML, and if your meetup data is there, it will show you that. So that we can do that with ngIf, and ngIf helps us to, what you can say, hide or show the element. Basically it's removed from the DOM or insert into a DOM kind of a directive. So it calls a structural directive. And same way, okay, so here I'm using one more directive. You can see ngFor. We'll see that in example. So what this ngFor does, it's actually iterates through your data. So let's say you want to populate a table, and table will have multiple rows, right? And that row depend on how many data you have to create that row. So that you have to do at a runtime, because you have to runtime create those elements, because when you get some data from your backend service, you might not be aware how many data are there. So for that we use ngFor. So you can see the ngFor statement. It's pretty simple. Let meetup of meetups. So meetups is basically an array which will be holding all your meetup data, and it will have few information. So you can loop through that and you can generate that many elements. So we'll see that in our example just a moment. So I'll just go back to my code, and what I'll do, I have already created a small sample application. I'll do a copy from there, the HTML. Okay, so what we'll do here, we'll create one folder. We'll name it as meetup. So we'll create one more component basically, because we are already having a root component which is app component.ts, and now I'll create one more component and I'll name it as meetup list component.ts. And you can see what I have done here. I created a component. I passed few metadata, the selector name, the template URL. I have given a name of the component, the class, the meetup list component, and which is just having some hard-coded data array, which is having two meetups. You can see the meetup ID, the name, the date, the description, the price, of the meetup. Basically, the meetups are free from our community. So, and the star rating of those meetups. So we'll have this information which is hard coded. So I created a plain component. Now I'll created a view also. So I'll again create one more file saying meetup.list dot component.html file. And again, I'll copy that which I have already did it today morning. Yeah, so I created a HTML file. You can see it's a plain, simple HTML file. I'm using few of the what you can say Bootstrap classes, and I just have a header of the page, and I'm just displaying. I've created a table, or on that table will display those two meetup details which is there on our component. So basically, I just created a plain, simple HTML file, the view, where we'll just render the meetup details which is coming from the component. And in the meetup list component file, we have given a selector as my meetups. That's what the directive name I've given. So any HTML I'll use, I just have to use that name. So all good. So if I go back, it's already running, compiled successfully. But if I go to my browser and run it, okay, so still it's not there. So what I'll do, so I have to take the selector, I have to go to my root component, that's nothing but app component ts, which is my root component. In the root component, what I'll do, instead of this, I'll remove this div and I'll append that directive over here. I did that. It compiled successfully. You can see, because my browser is still running. Any code changes I do. So in the VS Code, what I have done, I have done it auto save. So any changes I do after a couple of seconds, it auto saves it. So once it saved it, my Angular server, which is currently running, which again compile the code. And if I go to a browser, you can see I'm getting some good errors. I have to see why. So it's saying template parse error, unexpected character. So something must have I have goofed up. So I'll go ahead and see what I have did. So I have mentioned a directive over here, my meetups. That was the correct name what I have given, I guess. My meetups. You can use self-closing tags for components. No, actually, it has to be have one starting or one closing tag, because yeah, you can pass few information inside that also in the advanced level of directives. Okay, so I did the same. Compile successfully. My add meetups is not a known element. Okay, got it. So why I got this error? So what happened, I created a component, but that and I mentioned that directive in my root component, that's app component ts, but this app.component.ts doesn't understand what this my meetups is. So how to resolve that? So I have to import it. So I have to import that component over here, then only it will fix the code. So to import that, you can I can import here, or what I can do, I can go to my module label, and here I can do one more import, and that import will be my meetup list component. Basically, the easier part is you just take that and put as a comma over here. So I have to declare that meetup list component. As soon as I declare here, you can see I got a bulb sign here, and if I click on that, it says you have to import this. I just added that. Cool, done. You can see there is no compile error now, compiled successfully. And now if I go to the browser, I think these are the old docs. And you can see something is showing up over here. And you can see we got our first page, and which I'm having two tables, but sadly my Bootstrap stuff is not working. The Bootstrap styling, that's why the UI looks not so great. So what I did, I have not included a Bootstrap package. So to include a Bootstrap package, you can do that as a part of your package.json and do a npm install, which will install your Bootstrap package. Or I'll do the easier route. I'll go to the index.html and I'll just copy that Bootstrap CDN path, which will point to server hosting. Okay, compiled successfully. Okay, now you can see my application looks cool. You can see I created a meetup list. And which is having two meetups. One is OJS, which we have did it last time, the object-oriented JavaScript, and few details about that. And we are having Angular meetup, which is on October 28th, and few ratings. So this is just our dummy data, which we have just created in our component. And you can see with this example, what we have achieved now, we have created one more component. We call it meetup list component, and that component we have put it into our root component, that's app component.ts, as a directive in the metadata. You can see in the template we have mentioned my meetups, and our root component, to understand that my meetup, I declare that when I am defining my module. So when I have declared my module, there are also some metadata we have passed to ng module, and there I have mentioned the meetup list component. And when I mention this, now under this module, whatever the component will be there, this meetup list component will be available to all the components which is there under app module. We could have done that by just here also in app component.ts also you can have import it and you can use it, but the better place to import is module.ts and declare. So we declare the component there, and now it's available to our app component, and we used it, and now we can see how we have modularized it now. Now our root component.ts is just having page title, and all other logic related to my meetup is there in a separate component, and we just put that as a directive over here. Now you can see my meetup is actually in HTML. There is no element called my meetups, but we have created our own directive with this. Okay, so that's all how we created our meetup component and all. And if you go to the meetup component.html file, we're using those two structured directives. You can see line number 18, we are using ngIf. So I'm saying if meetup is there, then only you show the table. Otherwise, you don't show the table. Okay. And similar way, if you see ng for, and here there are two data is there, two array. In the array, two elements are there, and these two elements I'm iterating in my HTML using ng for. So that's what for ng for, which actually helps to iterate you over the your array data. And with let meetup is nothing but an individual element of that array, and I'm just populating the data. So if there are four array elements are there, those all element will populate with their data. So this is how we use for when we have to iterate over some object or data. So here we're using off. So in the ES6 there is something called in also is there. So that in basically iterate over your properties, the indexes. So if I use here in, that will actually return me the index number, like the array index number will be 0, 1, 2, 3, like that. And off will actually give you the value. So off is for value, in is for index. Okay, so if you so there is a question, can we use some templating library for defining templates for a component like handlebars or mustache. Okay, so Angular CLI also provides, you can generate a basic template, or you can still use other, like React also can be used along with Angular. So you can use those. So those are possible. So to test whether our ngIf works fine or not, what I'll do, I'll just comment out my data. You can compile successfully. If I go back to browser, you can see I'm not seeing the table anymore because I put a condition ngIf, if data is there, show me the table. So it's not even showing the table header also, because I don't want to show a blank table with just a header. So that's why ngIf is helping me to achieve that. Okay, so we'll go back to slide. Yeah, table contents can be read from database because you can have your APIs like the REST API, and Angular is having inbuilt services which will be there in my coming slides, or I'll show in detail on our hands-on session on 20th also, how we can connect with a backend API, get the data and populate on our client-side application. Okay, so we'll move to next slide. That's all about data binding. So data binding or the interpolation. So we call it interpolation also. So you have seen one place we are using this double curly braces to bind the data. So any model or the data which is there on our class as a property, that we can put it on our HTML by using this double curly braces. So there are multiple ways you can bind your data, and it's a one-way binding, the interpolation one. So one way means anything which is there on your property of a class, that you can bind to your HTML, like using double curly. Inside double curly braces, it's not a plain binding. You can do, it's actually a template expression. You can call it as a template expression also. So you can do some arithmetic operations as well, like you can see 20 cross 4 plus 2. So this kind of thing also you can do. So this will actually evaluate and it will return you the result, like 82 in this case. And even you can have your string as well as your variable also. So username is nothing but a property which is sitting on your class with some value, and name is nothing but a plain text which you want to display on your HTML. So you can mention like this also. You can see the third one, like, or you can use, so you can use the get username method also. So get username method, so you can directly call a method which will be there on your component class, and you can call that, which will actually return you the username, and you can display that also. So there's a multiple way you can do this interpolation or the data binding. You can see even you can do a binding to the attributes also, like input element is having an attribute called type. So type can have value like text, number, or the tel. So at the runtime, you can decide what kind of input type you need, and you can bind that as well along with this double curly braces or the interpolation. So these are the multiple way how we can do one-way binding or the double curly braces. Okay, so there is something called property and event binding also. So what we have, I have just showed, that's a plain simple data binding. But how we can bind the property of an element. So here, if you see in this example, image is an element, and which is having the attributes like source, title. So in the source and title, if we write a general HTML, we just say source. You see something special here, the square brackets. Square brackets around source actually helps us to bind the data with that attribute. If you don't provide the square bracket, it's a normal simple HTML what we keep on writing. But with Angular 4 now, if you just provide a square bracket around the attribute, you can bind to that attribute. So you can see in this source, I'm just binding meetup.image URL, which is nothing but which might come from your database, because you don't know what the image URL is, and you hit the database, you got it, you created a model on your component, and that you can just bind it like this, putting a square bracket. Similar way, you can bind title. Even I can define my image width and margin for my page, and I can bind that as well. The styles, you can see here, basically we are binding the style properties, style dot width dot px. So like this you can form your because this is like this, you can anyway do in JavaScript level as well, but the square bracket actually helps in us to do a binding over here. So this is about property binding, how we can do a binding to a property of an element. Similar way you can do an event binding also. So JavaScript will have a lot of events, like you can have click event, you can have mouse over event, you can have double click event, scroll event, swipe event. So many events are there, the JavaScript events. So if you want to perform some action based on some user events, we can do that binding also. And if I just say click, it's a normal as JavaScript word, what we do, click and the method name. But if you can see here, the special is the parenthesis. So around the click, I have given a parenthesis. So that is, so if you see this code, you can understand, okay, it's event binding, and then I have given a method name, toggle image. So which will, when I click on this button, what it will do, it will call this method called toggle image. So this is how you can do a property binding and event binding. And here one more good thing is you can see the interpolation, right? You can see the interpolation looks like a if else condition, right? So you can see some condition is there, show image. So this is basically a ternary operator of JavaScript what we're using here. If show, so text, when the image are showing, we want to show hide image, and when image are not there, we want to show the button label as a show image. So this is how you can do interpolation as well with a conditional binding, you can see. So this binding is happen conditionally based on the value of show image. It will either show a text hide or a text show. We'll see this in our application now, how this will work, this property binding and event binding. So I'll go back to my Visual Studio Code, our live application, which we are building at the runtime. Okay, so what I'll do now, in the here we are already having image URL, but in the HTML we don't have any table data for that, so we are not actually consuming that. So what I'll do, in the interest of time, I have already written it, I'll just copy it and put it so that we can save some time. Oh, sorry, I am looking at the wrong place. Yeah, so I'll just copy this button logic and we'll just put it over here. So I've just added a button which I've just shown you as an example, right? So which will give us the show image or the hide image thing. And so now what we did, we added a button which will, on click of that, it will toggle the image. Basically it will show the image or hide the image. So we have to write this method. So currently if you see our component, we don't have a method called toggle image. You can see that. So now what I'll do, I have already written it, so I'll copy for you from here the toggle image and I'll put it over here. So now you can see we are having toggle image, but it's giving some error. It's saying the show image actually doesn't exist on this. So okay, so to do that, what you can do here, we can just write so image and I can make it as a boolean. Okay, so if you're seeing how in the TypeScript, if you use this colon, so that means you can specify a type of that variable. So type of the variable is boolean and the default value is false. Similarly, page title, the type of the property is string and the value. So this actually the TypeScript helps because TypeScript has a strong type definition. So you can define a type of that variable next to the variable name and then the value. Okay, so all done. So image is done, but we need some styles also, because the image, we don't know the size of the image, how it will come, because I'm just loading some online images you can see from some of the URLs. So what we'll do, we'll give them some width and height also. So to do that, I have not copied the data part. So what I'll do, I copy this TDE also, and so we just put a header at that time, and now I put the data also over here. Cool. Now you can see I put a data where I'm using image element, and I have did a binding source, title, width px, margin, but this image width, image margin, these are actually not defined as of now in our uh, component. So we'll go ahead and copy the value of that as well from my already working code. So what I did that as well. Put it over here. All done. You can see I have mentioned an image width margin with both our number, show image, which is basically a Boolean false, and I have created a method also, toggle image. And if you go to the HTML now, I am just binding this. I created a new data or a column in my table, which actually will show the image, and I did a binding of this image URL meetup name. You can see this meetup.meetups here. This meetups is nothing but in the component, this meetups, and this ng for loop helps us to iterate over this and display this. All set, compile successful, no error. Go to here. Now you can see there is a tab here, show image, on my JS Meetup live localhost page, and when I click on the show image, we can see I get to see two images. One is JS, the other is Angular, and now my text has changed to hide image. And how we did this, we saw that, right? We have used this we use the ternary operator or the conditional interpolation we did, conditional binding we did, so many ways to explain that. And with doing this, what all things we did, now we did a event binding, because when I click on this button, one method is getting called, and that method basically toggling my that flag, which flag I'm using for ngIf to hide and show the image. And when I click this back again, that method got called. So on the click event, I'm doing a event binding, and here we have did a property binding, right? So this image URLs, the width of the image, everything we are getting it in our component, and from the component we did a binding to our elements. So what we learn now, we learn the data binding, we learn the property binding, we learn the event binding. So these are the major bindings is there. So there is one more thing is there, that is called two-way binding in Angular JS. So what that two-way binding is, so we'll go back to our code again.
There's a question.
So there is a question asked by Vardwaj saying, can you explain ngIf and its correspondent attribute value? Okay, so ngIf is just an directive. So if I go to my ng, so you can see here ngIf line number 18. So ngIf is a directive which just takes two values, true or false. So that two values you can pass it directly, true and false, or as an expression. So here if you see, we are doing an expression. So meetups, if meetup data is there, it will return me true. If meetup data is not there, it will return me false. Similarly, meetups.length. So if meetup is having any data, it will return me 0 or 1. So based on that, it's evaluating actually true or false, and based on true or false, it will actually show that particular block or not, even the table. So you can see ngIf is there on the table element. So on the table element, if I just put ngIf, so I can decide whether to show the table or hide the table. That's what the ngIf does. Okay, so now we'll see a two-way binding, what I was talking. So to what is a two-way binding now. So whatever we have done till now, it's everything we have done one-way binding, right? So all the data which is already there in my component, and I am just passing it to my view, which is nothing but HTML. So that's basically one-way binding. And in the event binding, so that happens in the interpolation and the property binding. And in the event binding, what happened? It flows from the view. So in the view, some action has happened, and from there I have mentioned, okay, this method has to be invoked when the click action has happened, and it passed from view to my component. But both were one way only, either from component to view or from view to component class, view to the component class. So, or the component class to view. But two-way binding is, if anything happened in the view, it will come back to component class, and from the component class, it can again go back to view. So that is basically a two-way binding. And how we will do that? So to do that, what I'll do, I will just create a variable saying list filter. So let's say I just created a variable list filter. So basically this filter is there. If we want to, if we have lot of meetup IDs, I can filter it based on some filter. So let's say I just put that, and that filter by default I'm saying JS. And this list filter, I can bind it over here. So now even before seeing how to bind list filter and all, so we'll see the syntax. So I go back to my slide, and I'm having an example on the list filter or the two-way binding. So here you can see the two-way binding. We are having an input field, and in that input field you can see something ng model. One that's also now the inbuilt Angular directive, ng model, which helps us to achieve two-way binding. And this ng model you can see has been wrapped around parentheses and then again wrapped around a square bracket. This looks a bit strange because we've used square bracket for property binding, we've used parentheses for event binding, and now both are there in two-way binding. So in Angular world, people say banana in the box as well. The name is quite funny, banana in the box, but yeah, that's how some people say it as well. So this is what we have to say in HTML. So we have to wrap the ng model around a parenthesis and a square bracket, and then the list filter. So the list filter is nothing but which is having values, right? Which is having our initial value, and this input type can able to accept any input. So whatever the input someone type in that input field, that will be assigned to this class property list filter, and that we can again do an interpolation. You can see at the bottom I'm again binding with the interpolation. So we'll see that in our code how this works. So if I go to my code in the HTML, here I just have to say ng model and the list filter. And this list filter, what I'll do a binding over here. And this list filter is having initial value as JS. Now you can see our application compiled successfully. We'll go back here. I got some error. Cool. Okay, so this error is saying can't bind to ng model since it is unknown. It is a known property of input. So it's giving me some template parse error, and why it is not a known property. So why it is giving, to use two-way binding, we need the help of some one more module. And what that module is, that module is forms module. So like this, we have used this browser module provides by Angular to run our application successfully on a browser. We need one more module now, and that's called form module. So here I have to say form module. And this form module actually gets from Angular core, I guess, if I'm not wrong. Let me check that. Yeah, it comes from Angular forms. So I have to say import form module from Angular. So Angular has done a lot of, okay, the actual name is forms module. Okay, so the Angular has done a lot of modularization, as I mentioned. So everything has been moved to a different module. So until unless someone doesn't need that, he doesn't have to import that from the Angular modules. So that makes your application faster, because you don't load all the low modules. If you don't need it, we just don't have to load it, because it's do a dynamic loading. Whatever the module it will need at the runtime, when that module does an instance, when it creates an instance, it loads all the dependencies. So here, to work with the two-way binding, we need forms module, and that's what I did. So I just import this forms module from Angular forms, which will be there in my node modules, and I put it as in the imports array. Now all set. Now I'll go back here. Now you can see my application is coming. You can see in that input box, by default the JS is displaying, because that's what the initial value I have given in my component. And now if I change anything here, you can see the below text also changing. This is two-way binding. You can see this, I'm taking an input over here, and it's going to my component class, and from the component class again it's coming back to view and rendering it, and it's happening so fast. It looks a good real time, right? So this is how your two-way binding works. So it flows from your view to component class, and from component class to back to view, and this is what a two-way binding Angular provides, and it's pretty easy. You just have to use banana in the box. Saying that, we'll move to our next slide, which is, so that's all about binding. We'll move to pipes and then the services. So pipes are pretty straightforward. So pipes helps us to transform the data even before displaying in view. So let's say you have some data, but you want to display it in a bit different way in your view, but your data, what you receive from your backend, let's say your data in a backend got all uppercase, but you want to display it in lowercase. So we have a pipe which will just convert it to lowercase even before displaying it in view. So Angular has few built-in pipes like date, currency, number, so many things, and Angular allows to write a custom pipes as well. So and implementing a pipe is pretty simple. You can see I just have to use this pipe after my model name. So meetup name is nothing but a model. On that data, I just have to use a pipe and then say uppercase. So what will happen? The meetup name will start showing in uppercase. And similar way, you can see in the price. If the currency, if I want the price, I want to show in a currency way, then I just have to say currency and Indian currency INR true. So if I just say INR, it will say INR. And if I say INR 2, then it will display a symbol. So these are inbuilt or built-in pipes what Angular provides out of the box, and pretty simple to use it. So we'll go ahead and use two pipes and we'll see how our application looks. So if we go back to our application and if we go back to our component, you can see we have a price where actually we show free. We'll put some price there, and you can see our meetup names are not in caps. The Angular is coming in camel case, but we want everything to be a caps. So what we'll go back to my component here. We'll make it smaller, OJS, and price, we'll put some price. Let's say we'll say 0 is the price. 0 is the price. Instead of free, I'm saying 0. And I'll go to this meetuplist.com, meetup list component, and here I can use pipe. So I just have to say pipe, and I'll say uppercase, cool. And the price, I'll say here again, I'll just say currency, which is again only pipe, and I just have to say I want to use INR, and I'll say true because I want a symbol, not the INR sticks. Done. Go back to browser, and now you can see the meetup names are coming in capital, And our prices are coming in a pricing format and with a rupee symbol, 0.00. And that's what the the beauty of pipes. It just transforms your data even before displaying to the view. And you can write your hardcore custom pipes also, which I'm not covering today. I will try to cover it on our 28th session, creating a custom pipes. But this is how you can even you can leverage the inbuilt pipes. And so now what we have learned, how, so Varadwaj is asking how do we access them? Uh, Sorry, I didn't get that. What to access? Can you please elaborate? Okay, so now what we have learned how to create Angular component, how to create Angular module, how to generate an Angular application. We learn interpolation binding, property binding, event binding, now the pipes. Cool. Now we'll go back to slide and we learn the Angular service and dependency injection before closing. So what the Angular service is, because I mentioned here Angular service because service is a very vast term. We call so many things as a service because the backend REST API is also, we call it as a service. But here the Angular service are nothing but a class which will have certain business logic. That's all the service. So services are mainly we use for common logic or feature because your component cannot have everything, all the business logic, because component will only have the logic which you need in a view. So any view manipulation or any data binding logics, those will go to your components. But all your business logics, which are the core business functionalities will be there, will go to a service. And or anything common which shared across all the components, that will again go to a service. Like let's say you want to do your backend request, HTTP GET and POST, and before that you want to create some header, uh, create header to pass to those HTTP GET and POST. So those you can write as a common service, and that can be shared across components. And Angular services are singleton. Singleton means one instance across app, and that helps to share the data and logic, data and functionality easily. Because if one of the component did some modification to the data, the other guy who has already using that component will get the latest data. That's will help with the singleton. So Angular services are singleton, and Angular is having inbuilt injectors, and these injectors actually help to create and manage those singleton services. So you don't have to create anything. You just write your class and you just say Angular, okay, this class is nothing but my Angular service. And now Angular injector takes care of everything by creating those instances and managing those instances. So we don't have to do anything. We just have to write the class. And then comes a dependency injection, because you can write a service, but how your components can access those service, and there comes the dependency injection. Dependency injection is nothing but a pattern which all of the frameworks follows, and in the Angular also does a dependency injection. And how it does it, dependency injection is nothing but a class get instance of another class. In a very layman term, that's what the dependency injection is. I have written my class some functionalities that I am dependent on some other functionality, and to get that other functionality I need an instance of that class so that I can use the method and properties of that class. And how we can do that, that's called dependency injection. So it's just a pattern. So this is a plain example of Angular service. And Angular service, we can just write a class like how we have done for creating a component or creating a module. Similar way, we just have to create a class. We have to export it because someone can import it because we are writing the modular stuff. So so in a JavaScript world, each file is a module, and whatever that file can export, the other file can import that module. So here we're exporting a class meetup list service. So now in our example, if you see those data which is having a data related to the meetup, like the meetup name and the price and the details, those are there in the component, which in the real application will not be true. You will be getting those data either from the backend service. So we also have created now a service which actually can talk to the backend service, but for now we'll, instead of putting those data to our component, we'll put that into a service, and that service we can inject to component, and component can use those data. So we want to create something like that, and later even that service can hit the REST API and can get the data. Okay, so here you can see it's pretty simple. You just create a class, and class is having a method. You can see that is get meetup list, which will give me the meetup list data, and it can return the meetups. And you can see there is something called injectable. So what this injectable is? So this injectable is actually required if my services depend on some other services which I can inject over here. But it's a good practice. Any services you are creating, just go with this @injectable, and this @injectable is nothing but decorator. If you remember, we have seen this similar thing at component, at ng module. These are nothing but decorators. So at component, decorator were there to make the class a component. At ng module, decorator was there to make your class a module. And similarly, at injectable component, sorry, the decorator is required here. If your service is dependent on some other service, then we can inject that over here. And again, that injectable, my TypeScript is not going to understand until unless I'll not import it from Angular core. So this injectable function is available in Angular core. So I'm importing that and then I'm using it. So this is a plain Angular service example. Okay, now we have created an Angular service. Now we have to register it, because now we just created a simple Angular service file, because this will go to a file where I just have to define the services. Now service is ready, but that service has to register with Angular, or register with the root module. How we can register that? So to do that, there is something called service provider. So this provider helps to register the service and returns the service class. So you can see we have already seen this code before, but what I have pasted over here at ng module, which is nothing but a decorator to create a module, Angular module. And in the decorator, you can see we pass a few metadata, the declaration and imports, what we have already seen. Similarly, something we have providers. So in the providers, I can just provide the class name, which is my service. So by providing that, I am registering that service with Angular. Now Angular will take care of that, so that it will be available to all the components. So Angular will create the instance out of that and will manage those. So I don't have to worry. I just have to mention that class name over here in the providers, and now things are done. Now my service is registered with Angular along with this module, app module. So now any component which has been declared in the declaration metadata property, all those components now can access the service, meetup list service. But any module which is outside of this module cannot access that service. So that's how we can do a service registration. Even you can register a service at component level. Let's say you have created a service and you want only that service requirement is for that particular component, that you can register that service only for that component, then other component will not receive it. So that way also possible. So this is called service registration. So to register the service, it has to be defined as part of Angular component or Angular metadata, sorry, Angular module metadata. Okay, so now we created a service, we registered it. Now how to inject it? Then Angular service injection. So how we can inject the service? So I'm pausing here. There is a question now. Can we build a Angular 2 for a newer app to be served as a static files, I mean, can we build the project to be used not only by Node, by directly clicking on that HTML index file? You can do this, but the problem is that's not the good standard now, Mayank. So because at the end it has to run on some server, because at the end if you're creating a web application, you have to host it at the some server. So that's why, and with direct clicking on the HTML file and opening, there are cost issue also is there. Cross is nothing, course is nothing but the cross origin issues. So sometimes a browser doesn't allows, if you are we are connecting with some REST APIs, so those calls will fail. So if you're just creating a simple HTML file, nothing is there, then you don't have to use Angular also. So Angular, so that's why, yeah, that's not a suggested way. Okay, so we'll come back to our Angular service injection. So here now we created a service, we registered it. Now we have to inject it. To inject it, it's pretty simple. You can see all class will have a constructor, and that's there as part of ES6, right? And the constructor will execute automatically whenever that class initialization happens, or when the class instance uh, happens. So in that constructor, we can just put that meetup list service. Meetup list service is nothing but a service which we have created. And I created a private variable underscore meetup list service. So this underscore is only for our standard purpose, because this underscore doesn't mean it will make it private, but in JavaScript ES6 world, anything we want to create private, we just give a name starts with underscore, so that by seeing it only I can understand it's a private variable. But you can do without underscore also. This is just kind of a best practice we follow. So private underscore meetup list service. So I created a private variable or the instance now, private instance, which I assign the instance of meetup list service, my service. So now my service instance or the meetup list service instance, what we have created, now that instance is available in my meetup list component. So this is how now we inject it. Injection is pretty simple, just a constructor, and in the constructor which gets called automatically whenever you meet this component initialization happen, and during the initialization phase you will get the instance of service also. And to use that service, obviously you have to import it. So that's why that import meetup list service is there. So this is how you can do a service injection. Okay, so I can understand that we have to publish it to server, but we can include Angular resources like AngularJS scripts in index file, like we used to do in AngularJS 1. Like I was reading a query or the question which has come from Mayank in our live chat room. You can do that. So there are CDN hoster there, or you can download this AngularJS file. You can keep it somewhere and you can do that. But AngularJS, now the Angular 4 provides the more modular way of doing it, right? And those things are taken care already in the Angular 4. So in those era, you can still do those, but in the Angular 4 or in the modern development era of client-side application development, those are not the best practices. But yes, you can still do that. And like we used to do in AngularJS 1 in the index.html, you just provide the JavaScript, load that JavaScript file and start using it. You can still do that, because you can still see our index.html file is there in our project also. But yeah, but that's not the standard practice now. Okay, so there is one more question. Is there a way to group my declaration and providers? As my application scales up, I'll end up creating more components and services. All the components should register in app module. No, that's not true. So you can create a feature module. Let's say if your application grows up, you can separate your application feature wise. Let's say so feature 1, feature 2. So you can feature 1 will have your one module, so all the services related to the feature 1 will be registered in the your feature 1 module, and finally that feature 1 module only you can import into your root module. So in that way your each module will be separate, and only those module will come to a root module, so you don't have to dump everything to a root module. So that's the answer for the Prem Kumar's question. Is there another way to group our structure the same? So you can structure it through module. Okay, so that's about Angular service injection, and we'll go back quickly to our code and we'll do the same before wrapping up. So I'll go back to my Visual Studio Code, and now you can see everything has dumped into this component. So what we'll do, we'll create a service quickly. So what I'll do, I'll just name it meetup. Let's go list service yes. Okay, so I created now service. So in the interest of time, I have already done it. I'll copy, and although I have already explained the code, so I copied a service file and I pasted it here. So what I did, I just created a class saying meetup list service. I'm having a method get meetup list, and which is just returning my all meetup data. So now what I can do, I can go to my component TS and I can just delete this guy. I will delete this data now from here. So I just have a now meetup variable, which is nothing but a blank array. And now what I'll do, I'll register that service, I'll inject it my component, and application should work same way, because application we are not changing, we're just changing the behind the scene architecture. So now, so in the meetup list, sorry, so I did, so I use underscore, but okay, I make it a dash for extended. Yeah. So now what I did, now we have to register it. To register it, I have to go to my app module.tsc. Even I can register at my root component also, but I don't want to do that. In the module label, in the provider section, I can put it meetup service. So once I put it, you can see it gives me a bulb. This is very good. I like this. And then it just add that meetup service. So now my registration is done. I created a service. My registration is done. Now I have to inject it. So I'll come back to my component TS, and here I don't have a constructor now, so I'll just write a constructor. I'll write a private. So okay, in the TypeScript, private, public, those things are available, so we can leverage those. So I can say private, and the service name is meetup list service. So I'll create a variable similar to that. I'm saying meetup list service. I'll use a colon and service. So, and the body of constructor, which will be basically a blank. So now it's giving me error. This meetup list service it cannot find. So basically I have to import it. So to import it, I can say import meetup list service from, so it's the slash this meetup list service. So I just have to use this name. So you can see I don't have to say TS or JS, because that's Angular takes care. So I just say meetup list.service, the file name. Now no error. I can say compile successfully. Everything is running fine. But so in the component.ts, now I'm getting this, but the problem is I'm not getting that data in the meetups. So how can we do that? So here, one thing which I have not explained. So there are some Angular hooks are there, lifecycle hooks, which I can explain it on our 28th session in detail. So one of the hook is ng on init. So what these hooks are there? So in the Angular lifecycle phase, when Angular compiles and runs everything, there are multiple hooks happens. So you can tap on those hooks and you can perform some activity. So ng on init is a hook which run as soon as my component get initialized. So once component get initialized, ng on init gets called automatically. So when initialization will happen, I'll get my service instance, and this service instance. So using this service instance, what I'll do, I'll fill this model, which is nothing but meter. So any variable you have to use inside your component, you have to use this keyword. So this dot meetups equal to meetup dot service dot. Okay, so again this will be this. Then start meetup dot service. Now you can see the intelligence comes into picture. GitHub plus cool. Done. You can see I now no errors, compile successfully, and now all my data went to here. And now on the ng on init, which is a lifecycle hook, which will get called automatically whenever my component gets started. And I'll go back to it's working fine the same way. We just now getting the data from the service instead of component. I don't know why Angular price is saying 5.6. I have to see that. So if I go to my service, I mentioned 5.6. Yeah, I mentioned this just to show that pipe. So you can see we are using a currency pipe over there. So although there are 3 digits are there in the price, but because I've used this currency pipe, it's because our prices are generally 2 digit after the dot. So that's why it's just showing 5.56. So it's rounding up. So if I just make it 0, it shows the 0. Cool. So that's all. So just a quick recap what we have done. So there is a question from Prem Kumar. So we can inject one module to another. So when we say inject, so we don't call it inject, we call it an import. So if you can see in our module, we are already importing 2 modules, that is browser module and form module, which is actually Angular module. Similarly, we can create our own feature module, let's say feature 1 module, and that we can import. So just a quick recap. So there is one more question. If I don't know anything on Angular 1 or 2, can I learn Angular 4? Absolutely, you can learn. So because Angular 4 doesn't have any carryover from Angular 1, although there is a little bit concept-wise is there, but yeah, that concept you can start learning, and don't try to learn Angular 1 if you are never going to work on Angular, because start learning Angular 4. That's the best way to go. And there is one more question on our channel. How is it different from React in solving problems? Okay, React is mainly for our DOM manipulation, because React is pretty good in the DOM manipulation basically, because React is all about view. But AngularJS is not only view, it has a view as well as our components, services, directives, so many things. So basically, even you can do a mix and match. I've seen the people have used Angular plus React also, just to take the best part of React, which is a view. So yeah, so that's how that we can differentiate between React and Angular. Okay, so with this, I'll go back to my slide, which is a good slide to say thank you. And just a quick recap what we have learned. So we learned what is Angular, we created a sample application, we learned the bindings, we learned the pipes, services, dependency injection. There are a lot more also in Angular to be learned. So for that, we are conducting a session on our 28th October. Right, and there will be doing a hands-on session, and we'll be using the other features like connecting with the backend services, getting the data, populating on our view, creating a few more complicated directives and custom pipes. So with that, thank you all for joining the session. If you have any question, you can still ping me, or you can ping on our Slack channel, or you can ping on meetup.com. I'll be answering those, and I'll send you the link by today evening, the slides and the code what I have presented. Thank you all.
Thanks, Patro. We'll be closing the session now. Thanks everybody for joining. Have a good evening. Bye.